Continuing Crassus from Plutarch's Lives, translated by John Dryden, revised by Arthur Hugh Clough. Octavius, however, would not stay there, but with Petronius went down from the hill. As for the lictors, Crassus bade them be gone. The first that met him were two half-blooded Greeks, who, leaping from their horses, made a profound reverence to Crassus, and desired him, in Greek, to send some before him, who might see that Surena himself was coming towards them, his retinue disarmed, and not having so much as their wearing swords along with them. But Crassus answered that if he had the least concern for his life, he would never have entrusted himself in their hands, but sent two brothers of the name of Roscius to inquire on what terms and in what numbers they should meet. These Surena ordered immediately to be seized, and himself, with his principal officers, came up upon horseback, and greeting him, said, "How is this, then? A Roman commander is on foot, whilst I and my train are mounted." But Crassus replied that there was no error committed on either side, for they both met according to the custom of their own country. Surena told him that from that time there was a league between the king and his master and the Romans, but that Crassus must go with him to the river to sign it. "For you, Romans," said he, "have not good memories for conditions," and so saying, reached out his hand to him. Crassus, therefore, gave order that one of his horses should be brought, but Surena told him that there was no need. "The king, my master, presents you with this." And immediately a horse with a golden bit was brought up to him, and himself was forcefully put into the saddle by the grooms, ran by the side, and struck the horse, and made the more haste. But Octavius, running up, and got hold of the bridle, and soon after one of the officers, Petronius, and the rest of the company came up, striving to stop the horse, and pulling back those who, on both sides of him, forced Crassus forward. Thus, from pulling and thrusting one another, they came to a tumult, and soon after to blows. Octavius, drawing his sword, killed a groom of one of the barbarians, and one of them, getting behind Octavius, killed him. Petronius was not armed, but being struck on the breastplate, fell down from his horse, though without hurt. Crassus was killed by a Parthian called Promaxithras. Others say by a different man, and that Promaxithras only cut off his head and right hand after he had fallen. But this is conjecture rather than certain knowledge, for those that were by had not leisure to observe particulars, but were either killed fighting about Crassus, or ran off at once to get their comrades on the hill. But the Parthians coming up to them, and saying that Crassus had the punishment he justly deserved, and that Surena bade the rest come down from the hill without fear, some of them came down and surrendered themselves. Others were scattered up and down in the night, a very few of whom got safe home, and others, the Arabians, beating through the country, hunted down and put to death. It is generally said that in all the 20,000 men were slain, and 10,000 taken prisoners. Surena sent the head and hand of Crassus to Herodes the king into Armenia, but himself by his messengers, scattering a report that he was bringing Crassus alive to Seleucia, made a ridiculous procession, which, by way of scorn, he called a triumph. And for one Caius Pacianus, of who of all his prisoners was most like Crassus, being put into a woman's dress, the fashion of the barbarians, and instructed to answer to the title of Crassus and Imperator, was brought sitting upon his horse, while before him went a parcel of trumpeters and lictors upon camels. Purses were hung at the end of the bundles of rods, and the heads of the slain brush bleeding at the end of their axes. Now, it's one thing in the battle, but dismembering the body afterwards, or I'm not. Yeah, you don't do that. After them followed the Seleucian singing women, repeating scurrilous and abusive songs about the effeminacy and cowardliness of Crassus. This show was seen by everybody but Serena. Calling together the Senate of Seleucia, laid before them certain wanton books of the writings of Aristides, his Menasiaca. Neither indeed was this any forgery, for they had been founded among the baggage of Rustius, and were a good subject to supply Serena with insulting remarks upon the Romans, who were not able even in the time of war to forget such writings and practices. But the people of Seleucia had reason to commend the wisdom of Aesop's fable of the wallet. Don't remember that one. It's supposed to be like a red or an orange Aesop Fables book or something. Or maybe that's just something I remember from my childhood and it got lost in a move or something. But Aesop's Fable of the Wallet. Seeing that their general Serena, carrying a bag full of loose Milesian stories before him, but keeping behind him a whole Parthian Sybaris in his many wagons full of concubines, like the vipers and apes people talk of, all the foremost and visible parts, fierce and terrible, with spears and arrows and horsemen. But the rear terminating in loose women and castanets, music of the lute, and midnight revelings. Well, why does it have to be at midnight? But maybe you don't know who's involved, right? Rustius, indeed, is not to be excused, but the Parthians had forgot when they mocked at the Milesian stories that many of the royal line of their Arsacida had been born of Milesian and Ionian mistresses. Whilst these things were doing, Herodes had struck up a peace with the king of Armenia, and made a match between his son Pacorus and the king of Armenia's sister. Their feastings and entertainments, in consequence, were very sumptuous, and various Greek compositions suitable to the occasion were recited before them, for Herodes was not ignorant of the Greek language and literature, and Artavasdes was so expert in it that he wrote tragedies and orations and histories, some of which are still extant. When the head of Crassus was brought to the door, the tables were just taken away, and one Jason, a tragic actor of the town of Tralles, was singing the scene at the Baccha of Euripides concerning Agave. He was receiving much applause when Seleucus, coming to the room and having made obeisance to the king, threw down the head of Crassus into the midst of the company. The Parthians receiving it with joy and acclamations, Seleucus, by the king's command, was made to sit down, while Jason, I'm not sure how you're supposed to say that name, I don't think it's a J, but handed over the costume of Pentheus to one of the dancers in the chorus, and taking up the head of Crassus and acting the part of a Bacchante in her frenzy, in a rapturous and passionate manner, sang the lyric passages, "We've hunted down a mighty chase today, and from the mountain bring the noble prey," to the great delight of all the company. But when the verses of the dialogue followed, "What happy hand the glorious victim slew? I claim that honor to my courage due." Pomaxithres, who happened to be there, I don't know how the musical or whatever the line, but Pomaxithres, who happened to be there at the supper, started up and would have got his head into his own hands, "For it is my due," said he, "and no man's else." This king was greatly pleased, and gave presents, according to the custom of the Parthians, to them, and to Jason, the actor, a talent. Like a child's weight. Such was the burlesque that was played, and they tell us that the altarpiece to the tragedy of Crassus's expedition, but divine justice failed not to punish both Herodes for his cruelty and Serena for his perjury. For Serena, not long after he was put to death by Herodes, out of mere envy to his glory, and Herodes himself, having lost his son Pacorus, who was beaten in a battle with the Romans, falling into a disease which turned to a dropsy, had aconite given to him by his second son Phraates, but the poison working only upon the disease and carrying away the dropsical matter with itself, the king began suddenly to recover, so that Phraates at length was forced to take the shortest course and strangled him. What is a talent? Like 60, 70 pounds? Of, silver or whatever?